Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Thursday, August 7th, 2025, episode 458, and we're going to talk about, mainly the Southern Poverty Law Center's definition of woke. And we're going to try to tie it in with other topics like Ukraine putting together legislation to draft 14-year-old boys to go die on the front. All right, so standing with Ukraine. It's a nice slogan if you like Nazis, right? Because that's what Ukraine basically is. The people who are calling all the shots are essentially Nazis, and they are proud of it. They wear their slogans. They have brought back all of the World War II um, memorabilia, I guess, to show how they're proud to have collaborated with the Nazis during World War II. So standing with Ukraine, it sounds good, but talk is cheap, right? So you see that in Ukraine, so many people have died, so many soldiers have died. Like some people estimate that it's close to 1 million killed and wounded on the Ukraine side, and on the Russian side, it's a fraction of that, right? So Russia is not losing. It's Ukraine that is losing, and you can tell because they have to use press gangs to force people into the military. And the reason why they have to press them into service, force them into service, basically kidnap them off the streets and stick them in a van, and then the next morning they're on the front because there's no training, there is no readiness. And so they're basically cannon fodder, as they say, sent out there to take up space and then to die. I saw a guy who is basically about to be kidnapped, and he pulled out two grenades and he pulled the pins of the grenades. And he said, basically, get away from me. I am not going. If you pull me, I'd rather die. Right. And so the idea, of course, is that none of the kidnappers, none of the people in the press gang would rather die too. And so they would just back off instead of allowing this guy to let the grenades go. And I mean, you probably know that you pull the pin off of a grenade, there's a safety. So you have to let it go. And the safety, I don't know what you would call it on a grenade. Uh, it 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 releases, and then you have like 5 seconds before it goes off. But if you keep holding on to it, then the safety is still on the grenade, and you can probably put the pin back onto the grenade so that it doesn't go off. But anyway, so a lot of people are prepared. They know that there are kidnappers everywhere, and so they're walking around with some kind of self-defense. I've seen some other escapes as well, even beating up the kidnappers, which is very rare. Sometimes the community comes out to prevent them from being kidnapped, which I'm pretty sure is going to be risky. You may be arrested as a result. And this guy, because he pulled two grenades out, he was just arrested. And I saw a lot of comments. They were saying, well, better to be sitting in jail than waiting to die on the front. And if you haven't seen any of the Battlefront videos, you really must. The battlefield has changed so much. It's not like, any of the World War II movies that you see, Band of Brothers or uh, something of that variety, Saving Private Ryan, even Platoon, Vietnam era movies do not come close to the way that war is fought today. It really is uh, dramatically different. So people are dying and Ukrainian soldiers are dying and deserting up to like 100,000. I thought I heard someone on Judge Napolitano's podcast say that it was say a really, really high number. I looked it up and it said that desertion is up to like 90,000. 90,000 people just deserted once they got to the front, which is pretty insane, right? So, to all of those people who say they still stand with Ukraine, I don't think you understand what it means, especially now that they're going to be drafting 14-year-old. I have a 13-year-old, and I can't imagine him carrying a rifle and going to the front. Right? That would be ninth grader in high school here in America. That's insane. And yet people are still saying, I stand with Ukraine. And all those people, maybe even if they realize that they were mistaken as far as the outcome, they don't apologize. They don't say, well, I guess you were right. They say, even now, well, that was the right thing to do. Yeah, you're hiding behind a slogan. You're hiding behind virtue signaling. And this is indicative of superficial thinking, right? You're only thinking on the surface. You're hiding behind virtue signaling. You're hiding behind cliches and slogans while you sacrifice the entire future of Ukraine, right? Because all the kids are dying and dead because of a war. Well, who's going to father the next generation? It won't be there. It's just so crazy how things are working out. And it might be that the wealthy, the corrupt and the wealthy and the connected, they're not dying. And so basically the next generation will just be kids of these corrupt families. And so you know that things will probably get worse moving ahead into the future. A lot of people not only hiding behind virtue signaling and slogans, while they sacrifice the future of Ukraine, they hide behind the fact that people don't know who Putin is, right? The leader of Russia. Like all most people know is what the West has said about him. And I don't know, right? So I said, is Putin really the bad guy here? Who knows? My theory is that he's really unpopular in the West because Putin is pro-Russia, right? So he's not corruptible like a lot of Western leaders. Like you don't see Putin's name on the Epstein list, right? They don't do that. They don't roll like that. But Western leaders, they're all over the Epstein list, right? So this is what's interesting. So it's almost like they hate Putin because they can't blackmail him the way they can all the other Western leaders. Something to think about, right? I'm not saying that he's not cruel. Oh yeah, I think he went mercilessly against all of the Western spies and operatives who were sent to Russia to corrupt Russia, to plunder Russia. I think Putin went after them with extreme prejudice, kicked them out, executed them, imprisoned them, right? Because their agenda was anti-Russia. And I think because of that, a lot of people in Russia, they recognize it, they understand it. And that's why Putin enjoys a high level of popularity over there, especially since everyone who opposed him left, right? There was that big exodus in the beginning of the Ukraine-Russian war. And so a lot of his opposition left. And so whoever is left, they're very pro-Russia. And they see the other side, which we cannot see here in America. And they're okay with it. So, and then thirdly, not only are they hiding behind people who still say stand with Ukraine, they're hiding behind virtue signaling. They're hiding behind the fact that they don't know anything about Putin. And they're also hiding in their ignorance, right? No one is looking at the actual causes of the war. Like, how did it get this way, right? And if you listen to the narrative, it's like, well, Russia decided they're going to invade Ukraine because they're that evil and stupid. It's like, are you serious? The U.S. has been meddling all over the world since World War II. And since the Cold War, the United States has done everything it can to undermine Russia. Most recently in 2014, when they basically overthrew the democratically elected government uh, and basically ousted him and replaced the government, which now gave us Zelensky, or Zanassi, as I like to call him. The next story is Israel, and not everyone in Israel wants war. Well, of course, right? According to the rules of racialization, generalization, you might say, oh, Israel is doing all this idiotic stuff. They're, engaging in genocide. They're trying to start a war with Iran. But that's a generalization, and maybe it's even the majority. Who knows? Right? But you're basically taking a small group of people to represent what the entirety of Israel is saying, and you're saying all of Israel wants war. Well, no. There was an article in the Jerusalem Post where former Shin Bet Mossad heads, Shin Bet is, I guess, their secret, Shin Bet. I think that's like their secret service, right? Mossad, of course, is like their CIA equivalent. Uh, their head, the former leaders urged Trump to compel Netanyahu to end the Gaza war. And the reason is obvious. They're, because of the war, they're destroying Israel. I mean, they're taking a lot of casualties too, and they can't afford to, right? Because there's not as many Jews as there are Israelis and Jews as there are the rest of the Middle East, right? Also, by engaging in this war, Israel is ruining its reputation in the world, becoming very, very hateful, even to the point where Jews in other countries are getting harassed as a result, right? It's that racialization thing. Oh, you're Israeli. Oh, you're Jew. Then you're guilty of whatever is going on in Israel, right? So there's that danger as well. Even with the United States' help, they will ultimately lose, right? Unless they are planning on using nukes, and that's my fear, right? They know that with the conventional weapons, with the non-nuclear weapons, they can't win, right? Iran showed them that in that what is it, 90-day war or whatever they're calling it. Iran basically spanked Israel, right? And we know this because the United States is now spending billions and billions of dollars to rebuild Israel. That's how successful they were, okay? Um, and so it seems to me that they're pushing war because they want to explore the nuclear option. All of this so that Netanyahu doesn't go to jail. It's just so crazy to me. The level of corruption and the level of I don't know, what would you call it? Psychotic behavior that you're going to sacrifice all these people, right, so that you don't go to jail. And I think it's pretty much well known now that Netanyahu ordered all of the Israeli military to stand down on October 7th so that they can have as many casualties as possible, so that Hamas can have as many hostages as possible to justify an invasion of Gaza. Okay. So there's that as well. So, so that's kind of what's going on in the world, and this war, phenomena of war is just ridiculous, right? Which takes me to the Southern Poverty Law Center's definition of woke. WOKE, woke, to be woke. Being woke is the state of being aware of social and political systems around you that cause harm to you or others. This systemic harms, wow, systemic harms can be environment. Oh, I'm sorry. The systemic harms can be environmental, social, or political, and often get worse the longer they are allowed to continue, intentional or not. Wokeness demonstrates critical thinking and question past surface level explanations, an understanding of the cause and effect of many societal structures, past and present. So I'm going to break that down. That's their definition. I'll give you line by line or phrase by phrase breakdown of what, is absolutely absurd. It's so crazy absurd. And a guy I taught a long time ago who all he does is read this Marxist stuff. He's kind of smart, but now I'm beginning to wonder because he keeps posting this kind of nonsense. He's not, but then if you read only Marxist readings all the time, then of course you're going to be very superficial. All right. So Southern Poverty Law Center is a leftist communist organization, right? So they are a harmful political system by definition, right? So I'm woke for recognizing that the Southern Poverty Law Center is harmful, okay? And it's so uh, funny, humorous that they can't see it either, right? So they're throwing all these rocks in a glass house, not even thinking that they are going to be hit by those same rocks. The first line is being woke is the state of being aware of social and political systems around you that cause harm to you or others. And like I said, it's funny because it's straight up hypocrisy, right? They are a social organization representing a system of socialism, which also infects this government. And it causes harm to many people, including me, right? So, if being woke is to be aware of those systems that cause harm, well, they're even totally unaware of themselves. And that's the hypocrisy, okay? But that also means that people like me are more woke than they are. And because they are so fixated on their opposition, right, they can't see that they are engaging in the same behavior. Uh, uh, and that's basically their out. They say, well, so it might look the same, but we're fighting the system. And so because the system is evil, it makes us righteous. But what they fail to understand is that the system that they claim they're fighting is the result of earlier efforts on their part, right? Equality, for example, all of the laws, right, uh, that exist now hurt them, right? And they're like, oh, these laws, these systems, these structures, they hurt us. Oh, let's fight against them. But see, they made them in the first place. And so it's this sort of downward spiral where because they don't understand their own past, they continue to increase the pain and suffering on everyone else around them, right? And the whole time they're saying it's not our fault, it's all your fault, when in fact it is all their fault. So instead of admitting that they were wrong, they double down, right? And so the harm that they cause is more poverty, less freedom, less ability to solve our problems on our own. And instead, the rest of us have to live with the problems that they create. I heard it yesterday in a Mises Institute video where Piketty, who tried to justify modern monetary theory, he states there that the really extremely high income taxes, confiscatory income taxes, that's deliberate. They know they won't collect more in taxes. It doesn't matter. But they just want to know what people have, right? Because you got to report it on your tax return. So now they have all the information of what everyone has, and so they can plunder it if they so desire. They're so harmful that they lie about their intent. They say that they're fighting for social justice, but in reality, what they're doing is trying to seize more power. Next line. These systemic harms can be environmental, social, political, and often get worse the longer they are allowed to continue, intentional or not. Yes, the government control of the EPA has increased pollution. The government control of child protective services has resulted in unsafe situation for children. Politicians drive us to war, which is harmful for everybody. The welfare program has created broken families, then created the need for child protective services, which also creates unsafe spaces for children. And politicians drive us to war so casually that nuclear war, right, saying that phrase, nuclear war, is now a casual expression. It's bizarre, especially if you're like me and you grew up in the 80s. It's just out of control, right? Their corruption is so deep that people can't see where it starts and where it starts, right? So you see one starting point, but you don't really notice what happened before. And all of this wrongness is subsidized uh, and creates the understanding that all we have to do is print more money and we eventually will get out of all of these problems. The next line, wokeness demonstrates critical thinking and question past surface level explanations, understanding of the cause and effect of many societal structures, past and present. Well, critical thinking sounds good, but and so I did that. I did critical thinking. I did deconstruction, and we went really, really deep. And I was at a faculty meeting and they were talking about critical thinking. And I was like, that's not critical thinking. That's Marxist false dichotomy, right? And I call it false dichotomy because Marxists, they like to say, oh, oppressor, oppressed. Everything falls into two categories. You're either oppressed by others or you are the oppressor. It's a false dichotomy because they leave out the third group of people, right? And that would be them, right? Those instructors, the people who think that they are going to be in control of the new society, the communists, right? And so they basically set up this dichotomy to get everyone fighting each other, but they're going to leave themselves out. So when the smoke clears, they seize power. So they benefit from everything that they teach without doing any real work. That is superficial, right? That is superficial of the superficial, right? That's how bad Marxist thinking is. People got upset at me because in the university, right? Because I pushed them to analyze far deeper, right? And so some of my colleagues would tell me that my former students, after only taking one class with me, really pushed back hard in their classes. And of course, I was proud. I never knew who they were, but just the fact that people came up to me and said, "Oh yeah, I got so and so in my class." One of your old students in my class, they never gave me a name, and yeah, they come up with some crazy ideas, which tells me that they're causing trouble, raising interesting points in their class. Um, and all of it to reveal the subjectivity of woke endeavors, right? It's just subjective. It's not an absolute truth. It's just a subjective way of looking at it. And they're much, much worse than what they seek to replace. And then it goes understanding cause and effect of society structures, right? Well, yeah, the way they do it is they write a historical narrative. And I really got to do an episode on history. I thought I already did, but I just checked and I don't have anything on history. So I'll be doing that soon, eventually. But the way they do cause and effect is that they dictate what the first cause is, right? So they decide when the story begins. So whatever happened before the story begins is not important, they want you to think. But it's just like Ukraine, right? We're going to begin with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We're not going to talk about the 2014 meddling of the United States, assassinations and what a destabilization of that country. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about all of the things that the United States has done since the Cold War. We're not going to talk about all of the things that the West has done to Russia ever since the Bolshevik Revolution, right? The Tsar was murdered by people who were funded by Wall Street. I mean, we're not going to talk about any of that. We're just going to start with Russia invaded Ukraine. See, and so the way, if you have control of telling the story, then you can tell it in such a way that, of course, people will agree with you, right? And so I would always say, well, what happened before? Let's deconstruct that, right? And then you would begin to realize that, yeah, there's a lot of manipulation. There is no real wrong or right that you can conclude and walk away with. And so the solution always is leave them alone. Like get out of it, right? Just let them do what they want. And chances are the fighting will stop. Okay. So basically, these Southern Poverty Law Center people, they pick a point in the past that supports their story, their narrative, right? Another example would be, of course, that the war on poverty, which started in the 1960s, they conveniently start at a point when poverty levels stopped going down, right? So basically, poverty level, the number of people in poverty was on a decline. And then they instituted their war on poverty, and poverty levels started going up. And so they start the narrative when the poverty level started going up, not when it was going down. And so how was poverty going down before? You don't even examine it, right? And so you want to talk about superficial. Wokeness is extremely superficial. So the Southern Poverty Law Center, in conclusion, is pushing us towards a Ukraine-style war world, right? The way that people craft their narratives, um, you can't see that what's happening in Ukraine is the same as what this wokeness that we're seeing, right? Ukraine drafting 14-year-olds is not unlike taxing the rich, right? Because both are coercive, right? They use force to do it. And so you might say, oh, but one is different from the other. You know, the rich deserve to be forced. No, no one needs to be forced. And that's what makes them all different things that they do on the same continuum. Because they use force, yeah, you're going to eventually see 14-year-olds being forced to do things they don't want. You're going to see wealthy people being forced to do things that they don't want. But it's all part of the same subjectivity, right? And so the way that I reset my perspective, the way that I look at things is either one is free with your natural rights or one is a socialist, right? So you want to be free. Always, always, always the choice is freedom. That's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.